During this time, Malcolm and I mixed with the mods in Aylesbury. We were both 16 years old, and we began to meet with these older boys and were curious to try out pet pills, Purple Hearts, Black Bombers and Dexedrine, and smoke hashish or grass. So we began to make inquiries where to get some. In the meantime, we would experiment smoking crushed codeine tablets and dried banana skins. This was purely to satisfy our curiosity and to experience new things. There was a pub in Aylesbury called the Flea Pit, situated in Kingsbury Square, and this was where we understood we could buy hash. However, at 16 years old, I went into this pub and became very embarrassed, as on the walls behind the bar were displayed ladies' knickers in various styles and colours. I felt embarrassed because the sight of these aroused me, as at that time there was very little pornography, and the sight of a woman in a short skirt and legs was very provocative for a 16-year-old. On reflection, I had a high libido, which led to a very promiscuous lifestyle. Shortly after this, I remember my brother coming home about 9:30 p.m. in the evening in a hurry. My parents were out. He had not long been released from detention centre. Our parents were away, and I had a girlfriend there. In came my brother and told me of his narrow escape from the police. About 6 of his friends had been out in a stolen car when the police had stopped them along the Treen Road, and had all jumped out and made a run for it. It was soon after this that my brother got sent to Borstal training for some crime or other. Nevertheless, it sounded a good lifestyle, and I wanted more of it. I had discovered I could buy chloroform from the chemist, and this was much better than sniffing carbon tetrachloride, or the glue substances that people began to experiment with. Shortly after this, with Malcolm Kirkham, after trying something like this, he took it into his head that he could fly on his scooter. He broke his arm and smashed his scooter in the process, but thankfully not his head, as he was wearing a deerstalker crash helmet that we'd stolen a few days before. The names of some of the lads that we knew that come to mind were Stuart Knight, Keith Guntrip, Ian Wilton, Dill Dowrick, Terry Tapham, he's now dead, Phil Davis, I understand he's now dead, Brian Collier, Mickey Coyle, Roy Mills, John James, Dave King, Jimmy Findlay, Phil Davis, and the like, all of which had one thing in common. They wanted to have fun and were the lads of Aylesbury. The time of writing this is about year 2000. At that time, after being sacked from the band, we began to go to a nightclub called the Banbury Gaff. Here we could stay up all night taking pet pills. We used to say getting blocked, dancing and talking, and in the morning end up in the gaff eating toast before driving back to Aylesbury on our scooters. Soon after this, Malcolm began to mix with the lads in Oxford. He was later sentenced to some time in prison for some crime or other. During this time, my brother was in Borstal, and at the gaff I met Alan Dodd. He was my brother's partner in crime, and he had escaped from Borstal. He was living on a barge in Oxford. He told me at that time he had a gun, and all this type of living impressed me, as it seemed rather exciting. Later, Michael told me that Alan Dodd had grassed him up, and that was why he had got caught and was sent to Borstal. We would spend time at the gaff, talking with other lads about crimes that we'd done, and planned various schemes, and bragged and boasted about things we had done. From this experience of mine, I can say there is no prevention or cure from this kind of criminal mindset. Once in that routine, you're on the road to serious crime, as all that I knew at that time will confirm. I can also say that a girlfriend could really help someone like this and avoid them getting into too much crime. It wasn't long after the great train robbery that we would find our feet as criminals. In '63, the great train robbery took place on August the 8th, 1963, at the Brigado Bridge in Lindlade, just up the road from us in Aylesbury. The thieves laid an ambush for a small mail train running from Glasgow to Euston and stole more than £2 million. For the 125 years, the train had run uninterrupted until that night, when it was stopped by a red light in Buckinghamshire. Bruce Reynolds, who crafted the robbery, was caught in 1969 and sentenced to 10 years in jail. We were very impressed at this crime. In the 60s, Ronnie and Reg Kray were seen as prosperous and charming celebrity nightclub owners and were part of the swinging London scene. A large part of their fame was due to their non-criminal activities as popular figureheads in charitable circuits, being photographed by David Bailey on more than one occasion, and socialising with lords, MPs, socialists and show business characters such as actors George Raft, Judy Garland, Diana Dawes, Barbara Windsor and singer Frank Sinatra. They were the best days of our lives, they called them, the swinging 60s. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones were rulers of the pop music. Carnaby Street ruled the fashion world, and me and my brother ruled London. We were the untouchables, said Ronnie Kray in his autobiographical book, My Story. On the 8th of May 1968, the Krays and 15 other members of the firm were arrested. Many witnesses came forward now that the reign of intimidation was over, and it was relatively easy to gain a conviction. The Krays and 14 others were convicted, with one member of the firm being acquitted. One of the firm members that provided a lot of the information to the police was arrested, yet only for a short period. Out of the 17 official firm members, 16 were arrested and convicted. The twins' defence, under their counsel John Platts Mills, QC, consisted of flat denials of all the charges and the discrediting of all the witnesses, pointing out their criminal past. The judge, Mr. Justice Milford Stevenson, said, "In my view, society has earned a rest from your activities." Both were sentenced to life imprisonment, with a non-parole period of 30 years for the murder of Cornell and McVitie, the longest sentences ever passed at the Old Bailey, Central Criminal Court in London, for murder. Their brother Charlie was jailed for 10 years for his part in the murders. The Kray twins were older than us, but their reputation was significant to us. They were in their early 40s, and I was just 17 and Michael just 20 years old when we got sent to prison. I admired their lifestyle and the way they conducted themselves. Both Michael and I were to follow suit. Shortly after my brother came out of Borstal, a form of transport was required for two. The solution to this came through my brother, who persuaded me to swap my scooter for a two-seater Isetta 300cc bubble car. I had inherited the scooter from Michael when he was sent to Borstal, but by now it had been renovated. I had built it in the spare room at home and resprayed it British Racing Green. It was a Lambretta TV175. The fuel tank and tool compartments were stove enamel gold. It had a dual seat with a passenger backrest with very little extras. There had been a craze whereby crash bars, wing mirrors, wheel racks and everything else made of chrome were generally attached to such machines, but not mine. I was proud of this Lambretta. It had to go to make way for the sky blue bubble car. Before this time, we had to thumb lifts to get everywhere, if the scooter was out of order. On one occasion, we were keen to go to Bedford, as the Who were playing at the Corn Exchange. We were dressed in our mod mohair suits, Michael in a blue navy suit, and mine a tan colour suit, and we carried a small suitcase with us with our night things in. We got as far as Ampthill, and we were stuck at the corner of Ampthill and Bedford Road. We were about 20 miles from Bedford. We were stuck, and Michael went into the pub to get a drink, whilst I stayed on the corner trying to thumb a lift. To my relief, and just after Michael had gone to the pub, a two-seater blue coupe Jag pulled up. It offered me a lift. I rushed up to the window of the car, carrying a small suitcase, feeling rather relieved that I'd actually got a lift, but at the same time anxious as my brother was still in the pub. I said to the driver cheekily, "Would he mind waiting for a moment?" The driver was fine about that and was okay. However, to my surprise and amazement, I realised who the driver was. It was Pete Townshend, the lead guitarist of The Who. Of course, that made our day. By this time, Michael had arrived and we both squeezed into the front seat of Pete's Jag. We told him we were off to Bedford to their gig at the Corn Exchange. Here's a song by The Who, Roadrunner. Can you imagine listening to this song driving to Pete's Jag? As we drove into Bedford, we stopped and Pete asked me to ask some girls the direction to where The Who were playing. Sure enough, they knew and pointed us in the direction of the Corn Exchange. It was a great evening.